A world without Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and Hinduism would be a very different place, particularly in terms of culture, philosophy, religion, and social structures. Here's a speculative look at how the world might evolve in the absence of these major belief systems. 1. Spirituality and religion. Alternative belief systems. Without the Abrahamic religions and Hinduism, different spiritual and religious practices would likely have taken stronger roots. Religions that existed alongside these, such as Buddhism, Taoism, Shinto, and various indigenous spiritual practices, might have gained more prominence. Buddhism. In this scenario, Buddhism, with its emphasis on inner peace, self-realization, and compassion, could have spread globally and become the dominant spiritual practice. Many aspects of Buddhist philosophy, such as mindfulness, compassion, and detachment from materialism, could shape the cultural and social fabric. Taoism. With its focus on harmony with nature, balance, and simplicity, Taoism might have greatly influenced the governance, environmental policies, and overall lifestyle of various societies. Indigenous religions. The various indigenous belief systems around the world that view nature as sacred and promote spiritual practices based on natural cycles would be more central. Many of these systems emphasize deep spiritual connection to the earth, ancestor worship, and rituals related to harvests, seasons, and community. 2. Philosophical development. Focus on nature and balance. Philosophies based on harmony with nature, balance, and mindfulness would likely be central. Without the influence of Abrahamic religions or Hinduism, societies might emphasize principles like unity with nature, interconnectedness, and human flourishing. Eastern philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism might have become the guiding systems for ethics, politics, and personal development. Secular humanism might have risen earlier as a guiding moral and ethical system, emphasizing the value of reason, science, and the well-being of humanity without relying on divine authority. Absence of religious conflicts. Without the Abrahamic religions, many historical religious conflicts that have shaped politics, like the Crusades, the 30 Years' War, or colonial expansion driven by religious justification, would not have occurred. The absence of religious tensions might lead to a more peaceful world, without major holy wars, inquisitions, or religious persecution. 3. Cultural and social structures. No monotheistic hierarchies. The Abrahamic religions heavily emphasize monotheism and the concept of a singular, supreme God. Without these religions, society might not have developed the same kind of rigid religious hierarchy or the idea of one supreme ruler or God. Instead, there might have been a more diverse array of spiritual beliefs, leading to a less centralized authority in many regions. Polytheism and animism. Many regions would likely embrace polytheism or animism, viewing multiple gods or spirits as part of their worldview. This could lead to a more fluid understanding of spirituality, where humans are not seen as inherently sinful or in need of salvation, but as part of the larger cosmic order. No caste or racial divisions based on religion. Hinduism's caste system would not exist, and many of the social divisions tied to religion in Islam and Christianity would not have developed. There would likely be fewer hierarchical social structures, and the world might have evolved into more egalitarian societies, focused on personal merit rather than religious or caste-based status. Gender roles and equality. Without Hinduism or the Abrahamic religions, the patriarchal structures in many societies might not have been as pronounced. The oppression of women, which was justified through religious doctrines in many cultures, might have been less widespread. Societies could have embraced more gender-neutral roles and given women greater societal and political power. 4. Political and economic impact. Rise of secular governance. With no religion dominating governance or shaping laws, societies might have developed more secular political systems, similar to modern democracies, that are based on reason, equality, and human rights rather than religious doctrine. Theocracy. There might not have been religious theocracies like in certain periods of Christian Europe or Islamic caliphates, and more secular forms of governance could have evolved much earlier. Scientific progress. Without the restrictions imposed by religious doctrines on science, technology, and discovery, the development of knowledge might have progressed faster, with more focus on reason, observation, and rational inquiry. Religious-based opposition to evolution, astronomy, or medical science would likely have been absent. 5. Scientific and technological development. Advancement in medicine and technology. In this world, scientific discoveries might have been unhindered by religious opposition, such as the resistance to evolution or heliocentrism in the Christian world, or the Sharia law restrictions in some Islamic regions. The absence of these hurdles could have led to faster progress in fields like medicine, astronomy, genetics, and engineering. Interdisciplinary growth. With a stronger emphasis on rational thinking and problem-solving, there could have been more interdisciplinary growth where science, technology, and spirituality coexist and benefit one another. Ecological awareness. Without the separation between humanity and nature that some religious systems imposed, there might have been a greater global focus on environmental sustainability, biodiversity, and resource conservation. 6. Global relations. Less colonialism. Colonialism, which was often justified on the basis of spreading Christianity or Islam, might not have occurred in the same way. Many European powers, like the British Empire, used religion as a tool to control and civilize indigenous populations in Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Without the religious justification for these conquests, it's possible that global relations could have been more peaceful and based on trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Global unity. The absence of major religious divisions could have led to a more unified global society, focused on cooperation rather than competition. As religions would not serve as barriers between nations, the world could be more focused on shared values, such as human rights, freedom, and global sustainability. 7. Humanitarian efforts and compassion. Increased focus on empathy. Without the focus on doctrinal or theological differences, societies could place more importance on human compassion and empathy, with a global focus on alleviating poverty, fighting hunger, and improving the lives of the disadvantaged. Moral systems. Societies might look to secular humanism, Buddhism, or other ethical systems to guide morality and decision-making. Rather than being dictated by a central religious authority, individuals could focus on personal responsibility and the common good. 8. Art and culture. Creative flourishing. A world without religious boundaries might lead to more creative freedom. Art, music, and literature could flourish without being constrained by religious taboos, leading to a richer, more diverse cultural landscape. Global art movements. Global art movements that cross traditional cultural boundaries could evolve, with people freely exchanging ideas and pushing creative boundaries without fear of religious persecution. 1. Europe. Cultural landscape. Without Christianity, Europe's historical cultural identity would be fundamentally different. Many European traditions, art, architecture, and festivals tied to Christianity, like Christmas and Easter, would not exist, leading to the emergence of other belief systems or philosophies. Ancient pagan practices, such as those of the Romans, Greeks, and Celts, might have survived and evolved. Religion. With no Christianity, and potentially no Judaism or Islam, Europe might have seen the rise of other forms of spirituality. Paganism could have been revived, or possibly philosophical schools, like those of ancient Greece or Rome, might have become the dominant intellectual force. Politics. European monarchical systems historically intertwined with Christian authority would have evolved differently. Secular systems might have emerged earlier, with less influence from church-based governance. Economy. Without the Christian-rooted capitalist principles that emerged with the Industrial Revolution, economies could have developed along different lines. Communal or socialist models might have taken root earlier in some areas, focusing on resource sharing and community well-being over individual profit. 2. Africa. Cultural and religious landscape. Africa, without the influence of Christianity and Islam, would likely have seen a continuation of its rich indigenous spiritual practices, including animism, ancestor worship, and nature-based belief systems. Without religious divides, many African societies could have been more unified in their religious and cultural identities. Colonialism. The impact of European colonization, which was largely driven by the spread of Christianity, might have been much less intense or different. If Islam didn't expand into parts of North and West Africa, those areas may have had different forms of governance and regional cohesion. Social and political dynamics. Many African countries today struggle with religious conflict and ethnic tension, often fueled by the spread of Abrahamic religions. Without this, some conflicts might have been avoided, and countries could have focused on more unified governance systems that worked within their own cultural contexts. Economy. The economic development of African nations might have been less hampered by the religious-based colonial system. Instead of the legacy of extractive economies, Africa may have developed more independent, self-sustaining economies, rooted in local traditions and cooperative structures. 3. Asia-India. The absence of Hinduism, one of the world's oldest religions, would have had profound effects on Indian culture, its social structure, and politics. The caste system might not have developed, and India would not have been shaped by the religious conflicts between Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs. India could have been more unified without the religious divides, with possibly secular governance or the rise of indigenous philosophies like Buddhism or Jainism becoming dominant. China. Without Buddhism, which was influenced by India, China may have leaned even more heavily into its indigenous belief systems such as Taoism and Confucianism. These traditions might have shaped the political systems more deeply. The Cultural Revolution may not have occurred, or it could have taken a very different form. Southeast Asia. Countries like Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam would have developed along lines rooted in local traditions and philosophies, possibly animism or shamanism, with less influence from Buddhism and Islam. Japan and Korea. Both countries might have retained their indigenous Shinto and Confucian practices with less interference from Buddhism, which was heavily influenced by India's religious evolution. 4. North America cultural landscape. Without the influence of Christianity, indigenous cultures in the Americas would have flourished with a much greater emphasis on native spiritual practices,